the Wurkkos DL46, an extraordinary dive torch I have to tell you about, with 20,000 lumens for a fantastic price. When I was using this torch on dives, other divers came up to me and asked, what kind of torch was that? It was so bright, it lit up everything around us. And so that might already be a testament to this dive torch. Before I review these products, my goal is to put them through at least 10 dives, and this one went through 10 cold water dives with me here in Seattle. And honestly, I probably dove with it probably 15 or 16 times. It's such a great torch that I keep coming back. I do want to mention that Wurkkos had reached out to me and asked if I wanted to review this torch. And when they originally did, I read the specs of this thing, 20,000 lumens, and I thought, wow, that's like stronger than any dive torch I've owned. That's amazing. I'd love to get my hands on that and give it a try. And I let them know that I'd be doing a very neutral review on the dive torch for divers as a diver. So again, this is the Wurkkos DL46. Starting with, this dive torch has 3 different modes. It has a sliding ring mechanism that you use to change modes on its neck. So when you turn it all the way left, it turns off, and you turn it right to switch modes. Starting with the lowest mode, which is 1,000 lumens. And then we continue to slide, and it will get to 5,000 lumens. And then we continue to slide, bam, 20,000 lumens. That is like bright. Like, you could really blind yourself underwater or your dive buddy with this. Don't do that. I do want to mention that this is a really sturdy and solid dive torch. The glass is very sturdy. The make, finish, and everything about this is built fairly tough. And you know, being that this is like shore diving in Seattle, it's not very delicate to anything really. This has done a fairly great job at surviving the rounds that I've done with it. Just some minor scratches, but not too bad overall. And it's worth noting that the burn time on this thing is amazing, being that on the lowest 1,000 lumen setting, you get 24 hours of time. You could literally take this on a liveaboard and not have to charge it once, depending on how many dives you're doing, of course, but that's a lot. But more realistically, you're probably gonna do it on 5,000 lumens, which is about 5.5 hours of burn time. At the highest, blindingly 20,000 lumen setting, you will only have 3 hours of burn time. That's still more than a lot of dive torches, let me tell you. So, and you probably won't have it on high that often. It's kind of selective, it's blinding. So you probably have it on medium, which is what I have most. And believe it or not, this thing can go down to 100 meters or 330 feet. That's deeper than I think virtually any of us are gonna dive. So depth limit's not a problem for this thing. And all this for a price of $170 at the time of this review on Amazon. That is a pretty fantastic deal. It's worth mentioning that the light of this thing is pretty high Kelvin, so it's pretty white. You won't see too much warmth. You can kind of see that it's pretty blinding just on the lowest setting, but it's very white. So, you know, that's fine. I just wanted to point it out. In terms of operating, you can use one hand, and it's fairly glove friendly, but I will say this ring, it's a little hard to turn. You can kind of see, you know, I've never been a competitive thumb champion, but it is decently hard. I was successful turning this with my gloves on while doing dives, but it's not easy, especially without gloves on. It's a lot easier with 2 hands, but you know, ideally I like my lights to be one hand operational. And this one is a little bit on the fringe. It's pretty hard. And you might be asking, how big is the battery on this bad boy? Well, it's 30,000 milliamp hours. So that's pretty hefty. So make sure that's okay with whatever airlines you plan on traveling with. That is on the higher end. One thing that I found, sometimes when you're going through airport security, and especially looking through your luggage, well, obviously you'll have to carry this on, but there might be limitations for what they allow. And so they'll take this and they'll usually look for some markings to see how big the battery is. And this one is not labeled anywhere. It has no 30,000 milliamp hours on it. So they might ask, and so the important answer is 30,000 milliamp hours. But kind of taking it off, we can kind of see it's very simple design. The whole back of this thing is a battery. There's a little button here that shows the battery indicator, and it just screws straight in. It has 2 O-rings as a fail-safe. So if one fails, the other one hopefully will save it, and you can replace one when one of them fails. So that's nice. And it's chargeable by USB-C. And it just screws back in just like so. While on, it has a charge indicator here. When it's full, it's green. And when it's kind of getting a little empty, it starts flashing green. At some point, when it starts getting empty, I think it turns red from my memory. And eventually it'll start flashing red, and then it'll turn off. So there's your battery indicators, kind of have some gradient there. It's not super strong, but something. Out of the box, you get this little handle, which I found not super ergonomical, but I actually don't know what the intended design of this handle is. Are they intending you to hold it like this, or is it just more of like a hand guard like this? For the most part, when I was diving, I would be holding it like this or like this. And so it would just kind of roll, and it was just something that I could have my hand free. You know, I had a tool or something in my right hand. I would put it here for, you know, some grippy. So it's kind of partial Goodman handle. It's better than nothing. But like, I would never operate it like this. I can't imagine ever doing that. So this was kind of the style that I ended up with, where I was kind of holding it like this or something like this. And that was more comfortable for my dives. And this thing is pretty tough. They advertise 1 meter impact resistance. So that's pretty nice. And I did my due diligence with the battery. I burned it down at maximum lumens. I put it in water, because these things are water cooled, right? So they would get really hot if they're not in water. So I put in water, and I just burned it at the maximum to see how long it would last compared to advertised, which is 3 hours. It should last at least 3 hours. And this thing blew away my expectations by lasting 4 hours. Wow. But it is a brand new battery, so maybe it'll get a little weaker over time. So one unique thing about this dive torch is that it kind of bends the light in multiple directions inside the housing. So what you end up getting is a kind of unique spread of the light. Being in the center, it has a concentrated 17-degree beam angle, but on the external parts, it actually has an 89-degree angle. That's pretty wide. So overall, it's not adjustable. So you will always get that 89-degree beam angle, but I will say that in the center, it's a little bit brighter. So at the 17-degree beam angle, it'll be the brightest, and outward towards the 89-degree, it fades off a little bit, but it's still quite a wide beam. I did mention about this handle. This is what it comes with, but let's talk about mounting options. I do have a couple Goodman handles, and unfortunately, this size of the screw, this hole, is not something that fits any of my Goodman handles. I did see some Etsy things that you could explore building your own Goodman handle. You know, there's always do-it-yourself kind of style, but at this time I couldn't find that they offer any like Goodman handles for this. So you would have to kind of figure it out. It's a fat torch, so it didn't fit any of my soft Goodman handles. The screw didn't fit the hard Goodman handles. So it left me with the option of basically a lanyard for safety, something to clip it off with, and this thing. And so there is no other mounting options. There's no holes or anything elsewhere that you could potentially do. So one thing I will note, maybe it's kind of a minor annoyance, maybe you care, maybe you don't. When I clipped it off onto my D-ring, it would always be angled like this. And so one annoying thing is it could potentially blind someone without me knowing. So it's clipped off. Ideally, I like them to face down, so I'm not having to worry about blinding anyone. But this one, you know, my options are limited. So I just wanted to mention this is a thing, and it's a thing you have to consider if you care about. Lastly, let's talk about one of the biggest things is the size. This thing is 938 grams. And the size is about 168 by 64 millimeter, or by 6.4 or 2.5 inches. And so the size isn't too big of an issue, although it is a beefy boy. The biggest thing is the weight. And so, you know, especially some like very long dives, like 2 hours dives, like I would feel like this thing is it's getting a little tiring holding it. It's a heavy weight, and this is quite a bit of negative buoyancy as well that I'll hold on my left hand. That's fine. I can compensate with my posture, but I will say, you know, something to consider. It's a heavy dive torch. It's the heaviest one that I own, and it's going to be on your left, and that could imbalance you. And so you'll have to compensate. You might have to put an extra weight on the other side to help balance you out. But it's something to think about and figure out. So I mentioned it, but it's worth noting that the beam isn't adjustable, and by default you have pretty wide spread. And so one nice thing is you can illuminate a huge area with that, so that is nice. But also, if there's a bunch of particles in the water, which in my case in the Puget Sound there happens to be quite a bit of particles, you'll get a lot of backscatter across a wide area. At the 20,000 lumen setting, you could kind of blind yourself with that as well. And so that is something to consider. I just would turn it down to the medium setting, which is 5,000 lumens, and it worked pretty fine. But at 20,000, it was like all the backscatter was blinding almost. So, but I mean, there's still times where I really appreciate having at 20,000, but you're not probably going to just be going on every dive at 20,000 lumens. It'll be situational when you turn it on. And it did really well in that murky settings, especially at 5,000 lumens. I think they did a great job at the modes with 1,000, 5,000, and 20,000 lumens. It kind of gives you a lot of options to switch between. And for the most part, that's all I needed. Across all my dives, this thing proved very reliable. Admirably. It was always predictable, and you know, I have no complaints. There was never a time where the light went out or dropped, but there is a small quirk that I want to mention and I want you to be aware of. It's one of my feedback items for this dive torch, is that when you're changing modes, watch here, I'm switching modes between light and medium and it turns off. It turns off between modes, which is an odd thing. If I'm already light, I expect it to be light until the medium takes over. This is not a big deal, but I want you to be aware of it because it is kind of a quirk and one of the things I didn't like about the torch. If I'm operating it one-handed, you know, I'm kind of struggling to switch the ring with it. And so while switching modes, I would find that it would get stuck in between, and maybe there was something I need my light on. Maybe it disturbs others, like why did Don just turn off his dive torch? They'll look over and it's like, what's going on there? You know, it just kind of is a concerning thing when someone's turning their light off and then turning it back on again. And so this thing does it by default. And so, you know, that is a thing. It's, you know, it turns off in between modes. And just to have something to compare it against. Maybe it's not always apples to apples, but I always try and compare every single dive torch against my Big Blue 5200. It's a much more expensive dive torch, and it doesn't even do 20,000 lumens. But you'll see, I did a video comparison showing that this stable 5200 and what the different lumen of the modes of the Wurkkos against a wall look like. You'll see the difference between the beams and the different modes pretty well. Again, it's not apples to apples, but it gives you an idea against a consistent baseline. And one nice thing about, you know, comparing these two is the weighting. This one is weighted so much better than this thing. It's pretty heavy, but you know, this one also can support the Goodman handle too. The handle on this is quite nice in comparison as well. It has a lot more mounting options, but anyways, it's not a comparison against dive torches, as these are in different leagues in terms of things. I'm just trying to show what some dive torches offer, so you don't go buy the Wurkkos and think that these things might be supported out of the box. You might have to do it yourself a little bit. So ultimately, the major strengths of the Wurkkos is incredible battery life, unprecedented, high lumens, 20,000 lumens for a price of $170. The lumen to price ratio is incredible. I have no idea how they did it. In terms of, you know, you would think that maybe it's lower quality parts and everything, but from my testing and all the diving I've done with it, I can honestly say it is built well. And so, you know, it's one of my better built dive torches. I was honestly very surprised by this dive torch and plan to use it. And I might try to build a better mount, you know, do-it-yourself style for this thing. Because, you know, this thing is not super ideal, but, you know, it works to some degree. The limitations, I kind of just spoke to it, are the mounting options. You know, this thing is not fantastic, but it is workable. You know, I was okay with it. I definitely like this thing more than no handle at all. Like, maybe it didn't have a handle, that would be worse. So this handle actually makes it a little bit better. I just wish there were some holes or something that I can have a little bit of bungee and clip it off so that's pointing down. That would be nice. It would be nice if the battery had a label on it, so if I'm going through airport security, they might question maybe it is over the limit. Maybe it is legitimately over the limit depending on the airlines. And the weight, like I said, it's going to affect your buoyancy characteristics a little bit. It's not something you can't compensate for. It's a big boy and it's a little bit heavy, so just be aware of that. So who's this for? Honestly, I really think that this is a fairly strong contender for an entry-level dive torch for a lot of divers for the long run, at least in terms of the maintenance, the reliability, and the price point. This is an outstanding budget dive torch for the long run. Like if you need a dive torch that's powerful, is going to be reliable across many dives, then this is something to consider. For those divers who are a little sensitive to imbalance or just want better mounting options, it might not be for you. But otherwise, this grip was good enough for me. I'm going to continue using this dive torch. It's quite nice, to be honest. Aside from some cons I wanted to call out, I'm quite pleased with this light. It does quite a good job. And it'll probably be one of the dive torches that I recommend for its price point for newer divers who want a strong light for the daytime. If you're just looking for a torch for night, maybe you don't need such a 20,000 lumen option, but for daytime, this thing does buy you a lot of options, and even for nighttime, being able to illuminate an entire dive site was kind of nice. So that's my review of the Wurkkos DL46. Outstanding performance for the price. Let me know your thoughts about it. And I was really pleased with it across all of my dives, and I have lots of videos, almost tons of footage of me using this thing, and it was quite fun. It's not great for one-handed, so it was kind of challenging to change modes while I'm filming, but with that said, still had great performance. So if you are interested in buying it, please do check out in my description. I do have a link that I will get a small percentage of the sale for no additional cost to you if you use that link. So it supports the channel and I really appreciate it, but you're not obligated to use it. And if you're looking for general advice on dive torches, I have just a video for you to watch up here. And if you're just looking for more dive torch reviews and other gear reviews, check out this playlist over here. The more you know, the more you'll love and protect the ocean. Until next time.